We move on, and I know we've had him on recently, but I wanted him back to talk because I think something very interesting is happening in New Zealand politics and in New Zealand society. And that is, post the election, we seem now to be prepared to have discussions. And now that we are past the madness and intensity of Waitangi weekend in the start of the year, it seems, I think, a trend is emerging. And we had a most interesting conversation with Bryce Edwards earlier this week, who suggested that the debate on the Treaty of Waitangi or its principles might well be the Brexit moment for New Zealand. A moment where the person in the street, after 20, 30 years of reform that they hadn't been consulted on, wakes up and sees a New Zealand that is different than what they expected or what they asked for, and that they want to have their say. And some would say in Britain that the Europeanisation of Britain went ahead largely at the behest of bureaucrats and political elites. And in a surprise move all those years ago, Britain said, no, we don't like it. We just don't like and we don't feel like it's our country, so they went Brexit. One of you texted and said, this is TREXIT, treaty exit, TREXIT. It's a catchy phrase. I want it to catch on. But is that what's happening? And also we had this week a very surprising, I think, positional move by Winston Peters, who said because we don't believe there are principles of the treaty, we kind of don't support the legislation. But we might support that bill past its first reading, depending on what the discussion is. And we think the discussion needs to be had. So how are things going on the bill? We know that ACT have set up this special information site to have the debate. How is it going? We're joined now by David Seymour, leader of the ACT Party, and of course also the Minister of Regulation. David, are you heartened or disappointed by the response to this campaign you're running to have a rational debate about the principles of the treaty?
Well, in terms of the response to the campaign, we've had over 10,000 people sign up at treaty.nz just in the first couple of days. I haven't checked it for a few days since then, but it's certainly got a good response to the actual website. In terms of the wider campaign, yeah, I mean, look, people say there's lots of noise and it's all a bit rough, and yet here's the thing. We have now put this debate front and centre. And we're standing there saying we're going to have a respectful debate about the definition of the treaty principles. We're advancing an idea that they should be inclusive, they should treat all people equally. And actually, we're still standing, and the terms of debate, I think, are moving towards those ideas, which can only be good for New Zealand.
What about that wider context that Bryce put it in earlier this week, that there is something more fundamental behind perhaps this need for a debate or the call for a debate, and that is people want to re-engage and feel perhaps that in recent times on a number of issues in New Zealand, they haven't really been consulted. Things have been done to them without their consent.
Well, I think that was absolutely the mantra of the previous government. If you look at what Brooke van Velden has done this week with the into the government's COVID response, she said, and this is part of a coalition agreement across the three parties, New Zealand First National and ACT, that we're now going to let the public actually say what the terms of reference for the inquiry should be. And, prior to this, the Labor government that did the COVID response also set the terms of reference to the inquiry into the Labor government's COVID response. So, I think actually it's going to be across a number of areas where we start to say, by virtue of being a human being and a New Zealand citizen, you do have an interest and an investment in the future of this country.
All right. I thought that Mr. Peters was basically saying when we talked to him, was it yesterday, Ben? We're not limiting our interest in the treaty principles, Bill. Let's see what happens. He was indicating essentially an open mind. Are you heartened by that?
Yeah, of course, because, I've long believed that these things would be difficult. And when we went into the coalition negotiations, there was only 1 out of 3 parties that would support this. Then we got to say, look, we're at least going to introduce it and get to first reading. And I've said for a while, no matter what people say now or even next month or the month after, what matters is how they choose to vote after you've had that process of public input, which was kind of what you were just saying about, this is a moment where I think New Zealand just should be and more increasingly will be. So, if we've already got more of those parties, the 3 in the coalition of New Zealand First, are saying, well, actually, you know what, we might just give it a second look, then that's exactly the sort of progress that we need to make, and I'm very heartened to hear it.
Do you consider that the National Party, via Mr Luxon, have totally rejected the idea of progressing this bill past the first reading? And I've been trying to read the tea leaves and what he said. He said, we promised to support it to first reading. And I think basically the message has been, we do not intend to support it past that. Is that your interpretation of National's position on this at present?
Yeah, I have no doubt that he means what he says right now, but I just also respectfully raise the prospect that we may find in a year's time, when all of the debate's been done and the bill's been drafted and into Parliament and the public have had their submissions, that we might find ourselves in quite a different environment in terms of attitudes towards this particular bill. And in that circumstance, you might get a different result. So I've always said, look, I hear what they're saying now, but let's just, respectfully give them the opportunity to consider the decision after there's been a bit more information.
Are you prepared through the parliamentary process for the bill to change in nature somewhat?
Yeah, I think that's. If you respect the parliamentary process, you have to be. That's the whole point of it. It's been set up over hundreds of years to give the people access to it. And, again, I'll give you another example. That one of the reasons the firearms laws in 2019 and 2020 were so disastrous is that they were almost designed not to listen to anyone. And I don't think they got a lot of respect. And now Nicole McKee's going to change them. That's another story. But, you have to be prepared that people will come along with a good idea and you'll say, well, I wish I thought of that, but I didn't. So now I got to incorporate it from someone else. And that's part of the process. What that will be, well, of course, I don't know, because the whole point is of select committees is you don't know what will show up.
Okay, so right now with the Nats, they're saying no, no, no. You're saying give it time. They might turn around and say yes and change their minds.
Yeah, I just give them a chance to, reflect on it and decide where they want to be in, maybe a year's time by the time we draft the bill and go through the various processes that it has to go through.
Meantime, if you like, these principles of the treaty as they have been applied by our public servants and others and the previous government are having real-world impacts on people, David. We are talking later this morning to a woman called Janet Dixon, a real estate agent, who could lose her licence for refusing to participate last year in what was a compulsory course, and basically it was going to teach real estate agents how to do karakia and pauwhiri. And she just said, how ridiculous, that's got nothing to do with my professional development or maintenance, my professional standards. She is now facing the threat of deregistration and losing her livelihood. Can you offer any hope to Janet Dixon that she won't?
You can probably guess what I think about that case. As I understand it, the real estate authority has its statutory process to go through, and I'm not supposed to try and interfere in that, but I certainly am pleased to hear that the REA has taken that requirement out for this year, which makes her situation all the more ironic that clearly the real estate authority didn't believe that it needed to carry on. It's now enforcing something from last year that it's not enforcing this year anyway.
Yeah.